Hello, everyone. Welcome to Deep Sight. Let's explore the truth of history together. In the glorious era of the Renaissance, numerous outstanding artists shone like brilliant stars, and Sandro Botticelli was one of them. Botticelli is renowned worldwide for his unique painting style. His works, such as Primavera and the Birth of Venus, with their delicate lines, elegant postures of the figures, and poetic scenes, vividly showcase the romance and beauty of ancient Greek mythology and have become classic masterpieces in the art treasury of the Renaissance. Botticelli was born in Florence, Italy, in 1445. His original name was Alessandro di Mariano Filippi. Botticelli was his nickname, which means little barrel, and may have originated from the occupation of his brother or father. He was born into a middle-class family, and his father was a leather craftsman. Around 1460, at the age of about 15, Botticelli began to study painting under the famous Florentine painter Filippo Lippi at that time. Lippi's painting style was delicate, and he paid attention to the expression of the character's emotions, which had a profound influence on Botticelli's early style. In Lippi's studio, Botticelli laid a solid foundation in painting and learned the basic techniques and composition principles of painting. In 1470, Botticelli opened his own painting studio. His early works were influenced by the traditional painting style of Florence, and at the same time, they also showed his unique, innovative spirit. During this period, he created many religious-themed paintings for some churches and private houses in Florence, such as Madonna and Child with Saints, etc. These works already showed his talent in figure modeling and color application. In 1474, Botticelli painted Adoration of the Magi for the Medici family in Florence. This painting not only demonstrated his exquisite painting skills, but also reflected his in-depth study and reference of classical art. The figures in the painting are vivid and have different postures, and the buildings and landscapes in the background are also depicted in great detail, with strong artistic appeal, which also made him gain a foothold in the Florentine art world. The 1480s to the 1490s were the mature period of Botticelli's art. He created a series of representative works, the most famous of which were Primavera and the Birth of Venus. Primavera was created in 1482 and is an allegorical painting. In the painting, numerous mythological figures stand gracefully in a vibrant orange grove, symbolizing the arrival of spring and the revival of all things. The whole painting is bright in color, smooth in lines, and the figures have the typical aesthetic feeling of the Renaissance period, reflecting Botticelli's profound understanding of classical mythology and humanist ideas. The Birth of Venus was created around 1485 and is one of Botticelli's masterpieces. This painting depicts the scene of Venus, the goddess of love and beauty, being born from the Aegean Sea. Venus stands on a shell, and the sea breeze gently blows her body. Her posture is elegant, and her expression is slightly sad, as if she is full of confusion about the upcoming earthly life. With its beautiful lines, soft colors, and unique artistic conception, the work has become a classic of Renaissance painting. He was deeply appreciated and sponsored by the Medici family. In the artistic atmosphere created by the Medici family, his talent was fully demonstrated, and his works also added a brilliant touch to the artistic prosperity of Florence. However, Botticelli's later life fell into a difficult situation. With the changes of the times, the artistic style gradually changed, and people's aesthetic concepts also changed. His poetic and dreamy painting style was no longer as popular as before. The new art trend was more inclined to pursue a more realistic and powerful expression, which led to a significant decline in the market demand for Botticelli's works. At the same time, economic difficulties also followed one after another. After losing the stable sponsorship of the Medici family, his income sharply decreased, and his life became extremely difficult. When Botticelli was at the lowest point of his life, Girolamo Savonarola appeared on the historical stage of Florence. The appearance of Savonarola not only had a huge impact on the religious and political pattern at that time, but also, to a certain extent, influenced the artistic creation and life trajectories of many figures in the Florentine school of painting, including Botticelli. In 1452, Savonarola was born in Ferrara, a city in the northeastern part of Italy. His family belonged to the noble class. His grandfather was a famous doctor and local chronicler who enjoyed great prestige in the local area. His grandfather not only gave him enlightenment and medical knowledge, but also often told historical stories and moral admonitions, sowing the seeds of knowledge-seeking and justice in his heart. And the strong religious atmosphere in the family made him develop a strong interest in and awe of religion since he was a child. In his youth, Savonarola showed intelligence and enthusiasm for religion far beyond his peers. He often participated in the religious activities of the local church and immersed himself in reading religious books, gradually deepening his understanding of religious doctrines. In the schools in Ferrara, in addition to learning traditional knowledge such as grammar, rhetoric, and logic, he also paid special attention to religious philosophy, laying a solid foundation for his future religious career. In 1475, at the age of 23, Savonarola resolutely joined the Dominican order, and this decision changed the trajectory of his life. In the Dominican monastery, he eagerly studied the philosophical and theological works of Thomas Aquinas. Aquinas' rationalism and profound interpretation of religious doctrines built a solid religious theoretical foundation for Savonarola. He devoted himself to the study of the Bible, constantly exploring the true meaning of religion, and gradually formed unique and radical religious views. In 1482, Savonarola was sent to the San Marco monastery of the Dominican order in Florence to engage in preaching activities. When he first arrived in Florence, this city full of artistic atmosphere, but also filled with secular desires, made him feel conflicted and struggled inside. He witnessed the prosperity and luxury of Florence under the rule of the Medici family, and also saw the corruption of the church and social injustice. So, he began to criticize all this vehemently in his preaching. With passionate words and firm beliefs, he called on people to return to their true religious beliefs and stay away from secular sins. His preaching style was unique, passionate, and highly infectious, often able to hit the hearts of the audience directly and trigger their profound reflection on religious and social issues. Gradually, he won wide support and following among the people of Florence and became a religious force that could not be underestimated. Savonarola strongly condemned the luxurious lives of the clergy in the church at that time. They lived in luxurious mansions, wore noble clothes, and enjoyed delicious food and expensive wine, completely deviating from the poverty and humility advocated by Christianity. Some bishops and senior clergy owned a large amount of land and wealth, but did not use it to relieve the poor or promote religious undertakings. Instead, they indulged their personal desires wantonly. He also criticized the ugly act of simony, believing that it was a desecration of the sacred religious positions. At that time, the phenomenon of bribing to obtain religious positions was not uncommon, making the church positions become commodities in money transactions. Many incompetent and faithless people infiltrated the church management, seriously damaging the purity and authority of the church. In addition, he was deeply dissatisfied with the commercialization of religious ceremonies. The church turned religious ceremonies such as the Mass, baptism, and funerals into means of making money, and ordinary believers had a heavy economic burden when fulfilling their religious obligations, and the religious ceremonies also lost their original sacred meaning. Savonarola was deeply grieved by the prevalent vanity in society at that time. People paid too much attention to external clothes, jewelry, and gorgeous home decorations to show off their wealth and status. Nobles and wealthy merchants often held luxurious banquets and balls, wearing expensive silk brocades and a large number of gold and silver jewelry, and comparing themselves with each other. This excessive pursuit of material things and admiration for vanity made him feel that people had ignored the spiritual world, had weak moral concepts, and had lost the pursuit of true values. At the same time, he deeply hated immoral behaviors such as adultery, prostitution, and gambling. These behaviors seriously damaged the social moral order and violated the Christian doctrines and ethical norms. Brothels and casinos were everywhere in the city, and even some nobles and people of status participated in them. He called on people to abide by moral norms and return to a pure and upright life. He also accused people of being greedy and selfish. Society was full of the endless pursuit of wealth. Merchants obtained huge profits through fraud and monopoly, and ordinary people also blindly pursued money. Ignoring the care and mutual assistance between people, and society became cold and selfish. In terms of culture and art, Savonarola criticized some overly secularized artworks during the Renaissance. Some paintings and sculptures showed too much of the beauty of the human body and scenes of secular life, and lacked the expression of religious spirit and moral education. In order to cater to the tastes of nobles and wealthy merchants, painters created a large number of works depicting mythological stories and secular love. In his opinion, these works misled people's thoughts, made them indulge in secular pleasures and desires, and forget their religious beliefs and moral constraints. He also criticized some literary works and philosophical thoughts at that time for spreading ideas such as skepticism and hedonism that were contrary to Christian doctrines. The works of some humanists emphasized personal freedom and rights and challenged traditional religious and moral concepts. He believed that this shook the social moral foundation and would lead people to fall into moral confusion and spiritual confusion. The Medici family ruled Florence for more than half a century. They not only firmly controlled the political and economic lifelines of the city, but also were key promoters and sponsors of Renaissance art. With their strong support, Florence became a brilliant palace of art, and many outstanding artists such as Leonardo da Vinci and Michelangelo emerged here and shone brightly. However, in the eyes of Savonarola, the rule of the Medici family was a synonym for corruption and autocracy. In the 1480s, when Savonarola first arrived in Florence, Lorenzo de' Medici the Magnificent was already in the later period of his rule. Starting from the Book of Revelation, Savonarola predicted in his preaching that the anger of God was about to come and issued a severe warning about the current situation of Florence. Although his words did not directly name the Medici family, the critical meaning was obvious. He predicted the imminent deaths of Lorenzo de' Medici, the Pope, and the King of Naples. This astonishing prediction caused a great stir at that time and also made the Medici family wary of him. But a miracle happened. His predictions actually came true one after another, further deepening the superstition of ordinary people about his superpowers. His followers believed that he was the true spokesman of God, the embodiment of wisdom, erudition, and integrity. In 1491, Savonarola was elected as the abbot of the San Marco monastery. According to the convention, the new abbot needed to pay tribute to Lorenzo, but he firmly refused, claiming that his election was the will of God, not a favor from the Medici family. This blatant challenge completely angered the Medici family, and the conflict between the two sides quickly intensified. Soon after, Lorenzo was seriously ill and invited Savonarola to forgive his sins. Savonarola took the opportunity to put forward 3 harsh conditions. First, to sincerely repent and firmly believe in the mercy of God. Second, to give up ill-gotten gains. Third, to restore the republican freedom of Florence. Lorenzo agreed to the first 2 conditions, but for the condition of restoring republican freedom, which touched the foundation of the Medici family's rule, he could not accept it. In the end, Savonarola refused to forgive his sins. The death of Lorenzo became a turning point in the rule of the Medici family in Florence and also created an opportunity for the rise of Savonarola. After Lorenzo's death, his eldest son, Piero II de' Medici, succeeded him. Piero lacked his father's political wisdom and ruling ability. In the face of the crisis of the invasion of Italy by King Charles VIII of France, he showed weakness and incompetence and chose to surrender. This behavior aroused the strong dissatisfaction of the people of Florence. In 1494, under the leadership of Savonarola, the people of Florence launched an uprising, shouting the slogan of "People and Freedom," and successfully expelled the Medici family from Florence. After Savonarola came to power, he quickly implemented a series of radical reform measures in Florence, with the intention of turning this city into a divine republic centered on God. In terms of politics, he constructed a new political system, replacing the single election appointment system of the Medici family with a double election. Through this method, he tried to expand the political participation of citizens and let more people participate in the governance of the city. At the same time, he established a great council composed of 80 people as the highest power institution of the city to ensure the democracy and fairness of decision-making. In the economic field, he took a number of measures to restrict the power of commercial oligarchs, crack down on financial monopolies, and strive to restore economic fairness and justice. He actively encouraged the development of handicrafts and agriculture, vigorously advocated a frugal and industrious lifestyle, and firmly opposed extravagance and waste. At the social life level, he was committed to rectifying the social atmosphere and severely cracking down on social evils such as gambling and prostitution. He vigorously promoted moral reforms, requiring people to strictly abide by religious doctrines and live a pious life. He also closed many taverns and entertainment venues, trying to purify the social environment. During Savonarola's rule, he had different degrees of influence on the three masters of the Renaissance. Leonardo da Vinci, this erudite and talented artist, was in Florence at that time. However, Savonarola's radical religious ideas and his exclusion of secular culture formed a sharp contrast with Leonardo da Vinci's spirit of exploration in science and art. Leonardo da Vinci's research and creation focused on in-depth analysis of nature and human nature. The ideological atmosphere of Savonarola made the creative environment of Leonardo da Vinci in Florence become oppressive, which prompted him to later go to Milan, where he continued his artistic and scientific exploration and left behind immortal masterpieces such as The Last Supper. Michelangelo was still relatively young when Savonarola ruled Florence, but Savonarola's ideas still had an impact on him. Michelangelo's early works were mostly influenced by the artistic style under the patronage of the Medici family, and the religiosity and moral purification preached by Savonarola made Michelangelo begin to think more about the in-depth expression of religious spirit in his artistic creation. In his later works, such as the ceiling painting of the Sistine Chapel, we can see his profound excavation of the emotions and spiritual worlds of the characters in religious stories, which may be related to his ideological transformation under the influence of Savonarola. Raphael emerged in the later period of Savonarola's rule. Although his artistic style was more inclined to the elegant and harmonious classicism, the religious atmosphere created by Savonarola made him pay more attention to the delicate depiction of religious emotions when creating religious-themed works. His works, such as the Madonna paintings, not only have classical beauty, but also contain a strong religious warmth, which is not unrelated to the religious environment of Florence at that time. During Savonarola's rule, the status of Florence as the art center gradually shifted to Rome. On the one hand, the Bonfire of the Vanities action initiated by Savonarola burned a large number of items considered secular and luxurious, including some artworks, which caused certain damage to the artistic creation and collection in Florence. Many artists and art patrons were uneasy about this extreme behavior. On the other hand, the reform measures he implemented and the conflict with the Medici family led to political and social unrest in Florence, and the artistic creation environment deteriorated. In contrast, under the strong support of the Pope, Rome actively recruited artists and provided a more stable and favorable environment for artistic creation. Many artists who were originally in Florence, such as Bramante, etc., went to Rome one after another and started a new artistic journey there, gradually making Rome the art center in the later period of the Renaissance. Many magnificent buildings, exquisite sculptures, and paintings were born in Rome, such as a series of buildings and artworks in the Vatican, which have all become glorious testimonies of Rome as an art center. However, Savonarola's reform path was full of thorns. His radical measures touched the interests of many vested interest groups and triggered their strong opposition. His extreme emphasis on religion and exclusion of secular culture also made many people deeply dissatisfied. For example, in the Bonfire of the Vanities action he initiated during the Carnival in 1497, he led the people to burn a large number of items considered secular, luxurious, and morally corrupt in the town square, including jewelry, fine clothes, cosmetics, books, and some artworks. Although this action reflected his persistent pursuit of religious purity, it caused certain damage to the culture and art of the Renaissance period and aroused the resentment of many artists and cultural people. The bonfire of the Vanities, action, and the resulting losses were incalculable. Although there is no exact data indicating how many masterpieces were burned, it is certain that the losses were huge. At that time, a large number of cultural and artistic treasures such as books, paintings, and manuscripts were thrown into the fire. Savonarola's followers had a relatively broad judgment of what were vanity items, and many works containing humanist ideas, pagan elements, or considered contrary to religious orthodoxy did not escape. Some works that may not have been widely known but had extremely high artistic value may have disappeared forever, and some precious ancient manuscripts and paintings from the early Renaissance period, etc., may have been the only surviving works of the artists, and they also turned to ashes in this fire. From the perspective of art development, if there had been no bonfire of the Vanities, action, the art development during the Renaissance period might have been smoother and more complete. The works of many artists who were in the initial stage of creation or had not been fully recognized might have been preserved and passed down, providing more samples and possibilities for the development of art history. For example, the works of some young artists influenced by Botticelli's style might have lost the opportunity to be displayed and passed down in this fire, resulting in a break in the spread and evolution of Botticelli's artistic style. If these works had been preserved, perhaps we could have seen a richer evolution path of artistic styles. From the perspective of cultural inheritance, the Renaissance emphasized the revival and inheritance of classical culture. A large number of ancient books, manuscripts, and other cultural materials were burned in the bonfire of the Vanities, which undoubtedly cut off many cultural inheritance threads. If these materials had been preserved, they might have provided more creative inspiration and cultural materials for the artists at that time, and also enabled future generations to have a more comprehensive understanding of the cultural origins and development context of the Renaissance period. For example, some ancient books about Greek and Roman mythology and philosophy might have inspired more artists to create works with profound cultural connotations like Primavera and the Birth of Venus. Moreover, during the process of cultural inheritance, more artists would have been influenced by these ancient books and created more great works. So how did these two works of Botticelli, which completely met the criteria for being burned, manage to survive and be passed down to this day? As early as 1498, the work Primavera was mentioned in the catalogue of the Palazzo Poffalano owned by Lorenzo di Pier Francesco de' Medici on Sala Street in Florence. This indicates that it had already been collected by the Medici family at that time. Later, the work was transferred to the Villa di Castello, which allowed this work to escape the fate of being burned. In 1550, Giorgio Vasari mentioned in his life of Sandro Botticelli that he had seen this painting in the Medici villa in Castello. These early records provide clear historical clues for the spread of the work. Under the inheritance and preservation of the Medici family, Primavera has gone through the passage of time. As time went by, the collection of the Medici family became an important cultural asset of Florence. Eventually, Primavera was collected by professional institutions such as the Uffizi Gallery. Under professional protection and management, it has been well preserved and is displayed to the public, allowing people to appreciate this great work. So what about the Birth of Venus? The Birth of Venus was created around 1485 and was also a work presented by Botticelli to the Medici family. Initially, it became one of the collections of the Medici family and was placed in the Medici villa in Castello of the Medici family. Giorgio Vasari had also seen this painting there. After Botticelli died in poverty and obscurity, his works were ignored by people for a long time. It was not until the 19th century that people's evaluation of Botticelli began to change. In 1935, the fascist dictator Benito Mussolini organized a touring exhibition of the works of Italian masters. Since the Birth of Venus was painted on canvas and was convenient for international transportation, it caused a sensation after being exhibited at the World Expositions in London, Paris, and San Francisco. In 1940, the painting was exhibited at the Museum of Modern Art in New York, attracting a large number of visitors and further increasing its popularity. Since then, it has become a world-famous art masterpiece and is collected in the Uffizi Gallery in Florence, becoming well known to the world. And Botticelli has also been widely known again and restored his due status in the history of the Florentine Renaissance. There is no absolutely accurate number of Botticelli's works that still exist in the world. However, according to the data, there are more than 200 pieces, mainly including the following categories: painting works, tempera paintings, such as the famous Primavera, the birth of Venus, Venus and Mars, young man holding a round holy image, portrait of a youth wearing the medal of Cosimo the Elder. Frescoes. The frescoes created by Botticelli in the Sistine Chapel in Rome, although having gone through the passage of time, still have some parts remaining. For example, the works depicting the portraits of the popes of Rome, the scenes of the lives of Christ and Moses on the walls of the Sistine Chapel, panel paintings, Adoration of the Magi, portrait of Saint Francis, Pallas and the Centaur, Hymn to the Virgin Mary, the Vision of Saint Augustine, Coronation of the Virgin, Lamentation over the Dead Christ, Calumny, Mystic Nativity, etc. Illustration works. The illustrations he painted for Dante's Divine Comedy. There are 93 surviving manuscript pages, which are now scattered in the Vatican Library in Berlin. Sketchworks. Botticelli also has some sketch works that have survived. However, compared with the painting works, the number of sketches is relatively small, and most of them are practice works or creation sketches, preparing for his painting creation. For example, some sketches of figure images, composition designs, etc. Let's talk about Savonarola again. Although he had a certain inhibitory effect on the artistic development of the Renaissance, his influence on the religious thoughts of the Renaissance was even greater, and he became a catalyst for ideological innovation. In that era, when the authority of the church was supreme, most people dared not speak out against the corrupt acts of the church. But he stood up and exposed the various darknesses within the church with sharp words and fearless courage. This critical spirit broke the mindset of people blindly revering religious authority and prompted more people to start re-examining the essence and meaning of religion. For example, under his influence, some intellectuals in Florence began to conduct in-depth research on early Christian literature, trying to explore the pure doctrines of primitive Christianity. This pursuit of the authenticity of religion was in line with the advocacy of truth and nature in the humanist thoughts of the Renaissance, opening up a path for the further spread of humanist thoughts and gradually shifting people's focus from illusory religious dogmas to the value and dignity of human beings themselves. Savonarola's advocacy of the return of religious spirit triggered a profound transformation in the art field of the Renaissance, injecting new vitality into artistic creation from multiple aspects and promoting art to a new stage of development. In terms of creative concepts, he prompted artists to rethink the relationship between art and religion and no longer regarded the creation of religious themes as a simple formal expression, but as a carrier for conveying religious spirit and emotions. Taking the early works of the painter Giotto di Bondone as an example, although he had shown a realistic ability beyond his time in painting techniques, his expression of religious emotions was still immature. However, under the influence of Savonarola's thoughts, later painters such as Masaccio, when creating religious themes, paid more attention to conveying the spiritual connotations in religious stories through the dynamics, expressions, and the atmosphere of the paintings. In Masaccio's The Expulsion from the Garden of Eden, the pain, regret, and despair of Adam and Eve when they were expelled are vividly depicted through their distorted bodies and painful expressions, allowing the viewers to deeply feel the human struggle and the longing for redemption contained in the religious story. In terms of artistic styles, his concepts promoted the integration and innovation of various styles. On the one hand, his emphasis on religious piety led some artists to incorporate elements of mysticism into their works, adding a solemn atmosphere to the works. For example, when the painter El Greco created religious paintings, he often used elongated figure proportions, strange colors, and unique lighting effects to create a transcendent and mysterious atmosphere, making the audience seem to be in a sacred religious world and more deeply feel the holiness and solemnity of religion. On the other hand, his attention to real life also prompted artists to incorporate secular elements into religious works, making the works more lifelike and approachable. Like Peter Bruegel, He depicted the daily life scenes of farmers with delicate brushstrokes and skillfully incorporated them into religious-themed paintings. For example, in The Peasant Wedding, although it depicts a secular wedding, the expressions, movements, and the lively scene of the characters all show the simplicity and truth of human nature. At the same time, it also conveys the infiltration of religion into life, making religious art no longer out of reach, but closely connected with people's daily lives. From the perspective of the development of art schools, his thoughts provided the ideological soil for the rise of new art schools. Under his influence, some artists began to explore new forms of expression and creative techniques, gradually forming art schools with unique styles. For example, the emergence of the Mannerism school had an inextricable connection with Savonarola's thoughts. Mannerist artists broke the traditional aesthetic principles such as symmetry and balance, pursued unique and exaggerated forms of expression, and expressed their innermost emotions and thoughts about religion and society through distorted figure images, complex compositions, and strong color contrasts. The deposition from the cross by Pontormo is a typical example. The body proportions of the characters are deliberately elongated, the postures are distorted, and the color contrast is strong, creating a tense and uneasy atmosphere, deeply reflecting the complex emotions of pain and redemption contained in the religious story. In the field of sculpture, when Donatello created David, he no longer only focused on the external physical beauty, but also showed the courage and firmness in the character's heart through David's confident expression and slightly forward-leaning posture. Behind this, there is also the shadow of Savonarola's pursuit of expressing the spiritual connotations of the characters. In the field of architecture, the design of the San Marco Library not only pursues simplicity and solemnity in appearance, but also pays attention to the layout of the internal space to create a quiet and contemplative atmosphere, which is in line with the needs of religious practice and spiritual exploration and reflects the practice of Savonarola's advocacy of the return of religious spirit in architectural art. The positive influence of Savonarola on the art field of the Renaissance period was multifaceted and profound. He prompted significant changes in artistic creation in terms of concepts, styles, and the development of art schools, adding unique luster to the prosperity of Renaissance art. The political reforms and social rectifications led by Savonarola, although the process was full of difficulties to a certain extent, impacted the old privileged classes and corrupt forces. Politically, the double election system and the establishment of the Great Council he implemented provided ordinary citizens with more opportunities to participate in politics, breaking the long-term political monopoly of the Medici family and making it possible for the emerging bourgeoisie to participate in politics. Economically, his restriction of the power of commercial oligarchs and his pursuit of a fair economic order were conducive to the development of the emerging bourgeoisie and created a relatively fair environment for the further development of the capitalist economy in Florence. During Savonarola's rule, the status of Florence as the art center gradually shifted to Rome. On the one hand, the Bonfire of the Vanities action he initiated burned a large number of items considered secular and luxurious, including some artworks, which damaged the artistic creation and collection in Florence. Many artists and patrons were uneasy about this extreme behavior. On the other hand, the reform measures he implemented and the conflict with the Medici family led to political and social unrest in Florence, and the artistic creation environment deteriorated. In contrast, under the strong support of the Pope, Rome actively recruited artists and provided a more stable and favorable environment for artistic creation. Many artists who were originally in Florence, such as Bramante, etc., went to Rome one after another, and Rome gradually became the art center in the later period of the Renaissance, giving birth to a series of magnificent buildings and exquisite artworks in the Vatican. As Savonarola's influence in Florence grew larger and larger, he not only became the sworn enemy of the Medici family, but also aroused the vigilance of the Roman Curia. Pope Alexander VI tried to suppress him many times. In 1497, he ordered to ban Savonarola from preaching and also required him to go to Rome to explain his behavior. Savonarola firmly refused, claiming that he was the messenger of God and only obeyed the will of God. This completely enraged the Pope. In 1498, the Pope announced his excommunication. After losing his religious status, Savonarola's situation in Florence became more and more difficult. His political enemies united to attack him. In May 1498, he was arrested and charged with heresy, schism, and inciting rebellion, among other crimes. During the trial, he suffered cruel torture but always insisted that his beliefs and actions were just. Eventually, Savonarola was sentenced to death. On May 23, 1498, he was taken to the town square in Florence and hanged together with 2 of his followers, and then his body was burned. The news of his death caused widespread attention and controversy. Some people thought that he was a martyr who sacrificed for religious beliefs and social justice, while others believed that he was a dangerous heretic. After Savonarola's death, the religious system's evaluation of him was polarized. The Roman Catholic Church regarded him as a heretic, denied his thoughts and actions, and believed that his criticism and resistance to the Church were a serious challenge to religious authority, and his reform measures had damaged the traditional order of the Church. However, among the people and some religious reform pioneers, he won widespread respect and praise. Many people regarded him as a brave reformer. He dared to face up to the corruption of the Church and social injustice, and sacrificed his life for the restoration of religious purity and social justice. His thoughts and actions provided important inspiration and reference for the later religious reform movement and became the precursor of the religious reform. Savonarola's life was full of contradictions and struggles. He was both a devout religious believer and a radical reformer. He both promoted social change and caused certain damage to culture and art. His experience allows us to see the complex and intricate relationships among religion, politics, and culture during the Renaissance period, and also makes us deeply aware of the multifaceted nature of historical figures and the complexity of historical development. Dear viewers, thank you for watching. By taking people as a mirror, we can know our own gains and losses. By taking history as a mirror, we can know the rise and fall of dynasties. This is the story about Botticelli and Savonarola today, and it is also a side view of the rise and fall history of the Renaissance in Florence. You are welcome to leave your comments and discussions in the comment section. Don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel. More wonderful content will be updated every week. See you next time.